What's up, everybody? It's your boy Lee with the Live All Good podcast. On the next episode of Move the Needle, we tackle some pretty important information that involves democracy and your civic duty. Our guest has some really good information on what voter suppression is and what disenfranchisement is. So yes, we will discuss voting rights, and how critical that is to our country right now. These things and more after the break. Stay tuned. All right, welcome back from that short break, everybody. I would like to say, first of all, hey, Henry, how are you doing? I'm glad you could make it to our episode today. How's everything?
Great.
Good.
Glad to be here.
And I'd like to introduce our guest, Corinne Freeman. How are you today?
I am wonderful. Glad to be here too.
Awesome. I'm so glad both of you could join us. So the topic that we're going to talk about is, it's not really a broad one, but it's voting, right? We're going to talk about voting, the importance of it, voters' rights, disenfranchisement. There's an election, a U.S. election, federal election coming up, presidential election coming up November 3rd. So we're going to talk about a lot of different things. Corinne, would you want to just give a quick background as to some of the things that you might be working on briefly for now, and we can dive into it deeper into the episode if you want.
Sure thing. My name is Corinne Freeman, pronouns she, her, hers. I have the pleasure of being the state director of Florida for All Education Fund, where I am running a very large statewide voter protection and voter education program in the state of Florida, particularly focused on communities of color and counties across the state. With that is that we are really focused on voter registration, making sure all people are registered to vote by mail, understand what it means to vote by mail, what it means to vote early, how they can do it in the state of Florida, and combating a lot of the disinformation that exists around voting and vote by mail. Prior to this, I served as the field director for the second, and that was the campaign to pass Amendment 4 on Florida's ballot in 2018. Amendment 4 was the ballot measure that stated that returning citizens would be able to regain voting rights eligibility once they've served time, right? And that passed in 2018. But right now, we are seeing a federal court has said that actually you must pay fines, fees, and restitution in order to register to vote if you are a returning citizen, a former felon, in order to register to vote, which equates to a poll tax. Amendment 24. Yeah, the 24th Amendment prohibits poll tax.
Right.
Go look that up in your Constitution. That's not me, folks. That's American Civic.
Yes, that is actually on. It's a law. That's a poll tax.
The constitutional amendment
is unconstitutional.
Yes.
Right. So let's not be confused what that actually is. Henry, anything you want to ask about Corinne so far, or because I want to jump into something else before we go deeper into voting. But if you have any comments about that so far.
No, I'm just getting my toes in the water. I want to hear more.
Okay. So Corinne, before we really take a deep look at not just what you're doing in Florida, right? Because obviously that is always a hotbed state. I would actually like to start with kind of talking about democracy, right?
Sure.
And what a democracy is supposed to be, and the different types of democracy, because a lot of people I think might be confused with how we work here in the States, right? And for all my listeners here, or anyone who's going to listen to this, anyone that listeners may talk to, this is just based off of Google searching, digging a little bit deeper. This is all stuff that you can find. This is nothing that's coming off the top of my head, anything like that. But the main types of democracy are direct democracies, constitutional democracies, representative, monitory, and nonpartisan democracies, right? Here in the United States, we have what's a representative democracy. And I'd like to read, this is from Wikipedia itself, I believe. And I know people say, oh, we don't believe Wikipedia. Well, just wait till you hear this. A good democracy is defined as an institutional structure that understands the liberty and equality of citizens through the correct functioning of the government and its method. Also, it is a regime that should completely satisfy the citizens with its result. Just want to let that sit for a minute. What a good democracy is. So, yes, here in the States, we have a representative democracy because we have officials who are elected to office, but they are to represent what's in the citizens' best interest. So part of what we talk about and what we're going to talk about and are so highly charged for with voting is that if voting is not extended to all citizens, how are the elected officials truly governing in the citizens' best interest?
And I'd love to actually jump in here. So even just backing up, even beyond good democracy,
sure,
democracy. So democracy is a system of government where the entire population or those that are eligible for us in the United States, it's supposed to be if you're 18 and up, you have a say in how you are governed. You have the ability to say, these are the things that I want. These are the things that I don't want. Everybody has a voice, right?
Yes.
And like you said, the representative democracy means that we are the ones who we see candidates. Candidates come from our communities or from, depending on which election. So hypothetically, let's take it to the local level.
Sure.
I'm from a city. I'm from Miami, right? All the people in Miami don't get to make all of the decisions. A direct democracy would mean that everybody all the time, in order to make decisions, would have to cast votes. And that's how laws would be made. That's how policies would be made. In a representative democracy, we have candidates who come to us and say, I want to represent you. I want to be the one to make these decisions on behalf of you. I will be the voice of your community. And we elect those people to represent us to make those rules and those laws.
Absolutely.
And I think it's really important because I do a lot of my work around social and racial justice as well. That democracy has never really been something that Black people, many women, or other people of color have ever really had the opportunity to fully participate in. It has always been people have always tried to take our access from democracy from us. And that's why I'm so passionate about registering to vote and participating in democracy, because our vote has power. It really has power, and we have to lean into it.
Yeah, I would like to also, Corinne, I'd like to piggyback on that with that. We talk about, you talked about social injustice and a lot of your work around that. That's what is going on. We are really seeing the system for what it is.
That word.
The system is not broken. The system is doing what it was designed to do, whether you want to say it was designed to hold a certain set of people down, or whether it was to hold a certain set of people up. The system is doing what it was supposed to do. But that is what's so important about civic participation and actually a democracy for having all of its citizens participate. In theory, the democracy should work.
But when you have the certain constructs that are in place with certain systems, that's what we're fighting against now. And it's really showing what it was designed to do. But like you were saying, voting is so critical to making that first step in changing the system. Voting is so important to changing the system.
So I have a question here, Corinne. And I imagine this is something that you run into a lot. And I think that this goes in even deeper than the voting aspect, because what happens when you as a disenfranchised individual feel there is nobody that represents you worth voting for, which I think is probably, I mean, even for me as a white man who, you know, I believe in social justice and you know, various ideals, and often enough, I haven't felt that I had any. It was like choosing the worst of two evils.
Yeah.
Or the better of two evils. Excuse me. The worst got chosen, but you know, I was going for the better. But nonetheless, you know, how do you manage that within a population who is even less connected to a representative who obviously has no representation for their viewpoint and their interests? And then secondly, I imagine that grows into, with your work, helping people to begin becoming representatives of their community.
That's a great question, Henry. Great question.
Yeah. So to that, I say you organize. And I am a huge proponent of local advocacy organizations, because that's where the fight is, and that's where you have the biggest impact in your local and state elections. Become a member of some organizing entity that you feel represents you or your values, and participate. And the second thing I always tell people is run. Candidates are not any better than you. They put their pants on the same exact way that you do. If Donald Trump can be the president of the United States, why can't I? Why can't I be a county commissioner? Why can't I?
That's true.
You can, and you'd be surprised with just a little bit of training and the right people working your campaign. And when you understand the scope of issues, how not hard the job actually is. You just have to be a decent, sane person. Joining community organizations that are actively fighting and actively training candidates, actively advocating for our interests is the right way to go. I also am a proponent of broader organizing. I'm so a little bit about me. I'm a registered Democrat. I hate the Democratic Party. The Democratic Party does not represent me. I think the Democratic Party is also a home of racism and using and abusing Black people in our vote. But I vote with Democrats because the Republican Party is the party of open white supremacy, open oppression, right? So I'm a proponent of making, like, one, you understand the broader context, get connected in the community, and try to build towards something better long term. We got to crush the two-party system. We've got to get out of it, but it'll only happen if we build toward it.
That is a great way to really put that in perspective. Like, getting rid of that two-party system, because and I've had this conversation with some of my Republican friends when they try to combat a lot of the human issues that I talk about and bring up. They try to say, well, the Democrats did this, and I'm like, no, but it's neither one is a friend of the program. Right. I'm not saying that one is better than the other, but there's one that's a lot more overt, as Corinne so eloquently put, and there's one that, okay, maybe I can work with a little better, you know?
I hear that.
I wanted to mention, so Corinne, you talked about it's so important, and I agree with you. So much more important to be involved in your local elections and your local governmental processes. I'd like to point out that our other co-host Janelle like saw something very similar, and is making strides in the city where she lives with being part of the. I don't want to misquote what she's doing, but Henry, she's like on the school board, right, and trying to make changes within the school board, and even trying to get a position. Very similar to what you're talking about, Corinne, right? There was a need that she saw, and there's no one to represent what that need or interest is. So she's doing it.
Right.
Like, that's it. It's that simple. It's not that she knows any better or any worse than anyone else, but she's definitely like, you know what? Something needs to change. And okay, there's no one who's representing this. So I'm going to do the change.
Right.
I'm going to be the one.
Civic engagement is our responsibility.
There is no
it is a responsibility. And civics is bigger than just voting on election day. It is continuing to engage in the process. And if you see a gap that is not being filled, that is harming you or your community, and you know you have the capacity to fill it, in my mind, it's your duty. It's your duty to say, no, I'm going to fill this gap. Let me try.
Right. Well, and that's even if you don't know if you can do it, but the fact that you can't let someone else and wait for someone else to do it, you know? So I just wanted to point that out, that yes, that is one of many commonalities between us co-hosts, Henry, Janelle, and myself, that we're not waiting for someone else to have this movement, lead this thing. We're like, well, hey, we're going to try to put people on this direction as well. And I'm not just talking about what we're talking about today, voting. We're just talking about moving this country forward in general.
The needle. Yeah.
Well, that's where the name. That's where it came from. So you know what? Let's take a short break here, and when we come back, let's dive into a little bit more about voting, the disenfranchisement, voting rights, that kind of thing. We'll take a short break, and we'll dive into that right after this. All right, everybody, welcome back from that break. We are here with myself and Henry, and our guest today is Corinne Freeman. We are talking about everything related to voting, democracy, civic duty. Put it all out there. That's what we're doing. So when we went to break, we were talking about democracy, what democracy is, what it should be, what it kind of looks like here in this country. And I want to just touch on one more thing before we move on to why voting is important and the different constructs that keep people from voting. But I want to touch on one thing. It's called it's a thought. It's not really actual. It's not true, but it's a theory, if you will, and it's called elite democracy. And the theory says that there's a small minority of people, a small minority group consisting of members in the economic elite and policy planning networks that hold the most power. And with this power, they kind of control the independence of democratic elections. So if you read that kind of statement, and I probably wasn't that clear with it, but an elite democracy pretty much feels like what kind of happens with this country, even though we're supposed to have a representative democracy. It really feels like an elite democracy because the power is in the hands of a very small set of people.
Right. And that small set of people very often does not vote in the interest of the people that they are sent there to represent.
Correct.
When the representative democracy is no longer being representative, it becomes elite. And we now have an oligarchy, which means that the people with money has brought out our representatives, because our representatives are elite because they are following the money. They're following people who donate to their campaigns and their causes and their foundations.
Yep. If there's one,
not even the people,
the
corporations who are donating and who are instituting policy in the interest of the corporate entity, which is even worse than a person, because the corporate entity has allegiance only to share.
They don't have allegiance to people or feelings or human rights. That's so true. That's so true. That's pretty much what it is. If I have to say this, and then we can move on to voting specifically. If there's one thing that I will give the current president credit for, it's actually exposing what this system is and exposing what needs to be dismantled in order for things to be as they should be. That's what I'll give him credit for exposing it. We all know it's been there. It's been under the surface for a long time. No one has wanted to admit it or address it. Well, it's in everybody's face now. And we shouldn't be surprised. Some of us are not. But I will give him credit for exposing the system. Okay, moving on. I'm going to take the silence as agreement. But anyway.
Look, that's affirmation. Silence is affirmation here. Yeah.
Yes. No. Yeah, it's tough. But so let's move on to talking specifically about voting. Corinne, I want you to. You can have the floor here, and if we have questions, we definitely will chime in. But talk to the disenfranchisement of voters. Talk to that.
Yeah. So a quick definition of disenfranchisement, because I don't like to make assumptions about people or things. We don't ever want to leave anybody behind.
Sure.
So disenfranchisement is when rights or privileges in a system are lost and bar people from participating in a particular process or something, right? And so disenfranchisement is, backing it up a little bit, in the Constitution, Declaration of Independence, we hold these truths to be self-evident that all men are created equal.
Mm-hmm.
The first election, only 6% of the people who lived in America had the ability to vote. Only 6%. So juxtaposed to the words that we hear.
So we started way back then.
Way back then, white male property owners were the only people who were eligible to vote. Not young people, not young men, not women, not Black people, not indigenous people. Only white male, not poor people, white male property. This country is founded for some in liberty and freedom, but for most in disenfranchisement and barring them from the process of voice, because they understood that when that means that there is power and people want to control power. People want money. They want influence. And from the moment that Black people, I always start with Black people because I'm a Black woman, to this country, we were disenfranchised. And we saw, once emancipated, there was a period of time called Reconstruction that allowed Black people full rights and privileges as citizens, Black men, to be clear. And during that time period, we had the most Black elected senators that we ever have had in American history. There were more Black elected officials during Reconstruction than there have ever been in American history, the period directly after slavery, because we participated. We voted, we made our voices heard. Yeah. And once they realized that happened, they were like, oh, snap, we can't have this. Like, this is too much.
Well, hey, Corinne, and hold on for a quick second. I want to point out that, like, that is one part. I mean, obviously there's many parts of American history that aren't put out there, but what you just talked about, I think we'll have to do another podcast on that at some point, another episode. But the Reconstruction era is so rarely talked about. It's so rarely talked about. Everyone thinks, oh man, it was so awful for so long. There was a really good period there that was before 1900. I mean, you know, it's not talked about enough. But go ahead. Sorry, did not mean to interrupt. Yeah.
No, please. Like I sometimes I can pontificate on things because it's so important, and like there's so much that people that does not get taught, but people don't know, and we just see America for what it is now, and we don't have historical memory or context to put it in.
Right.
And it's so critical to understanding the moment that we are actually in now. And
absolutely.
So, Reconstruction, immense amount of Black folks voting and participating and doing well for ourselves. That's when we entered the era of like poll taxes, Jim Crow era, things that kept Black people. We made poverty, the conditions of people, Black people, the reason why we barred them from voting. So like poll taxes and literacy tests, things like that were created to disenfranchise Black people from voting. There was also massive voter intimidation, threatening to kill Black people that voted. There's a story of a Black veteran who fought against the Nazis, who came back home to Georgia and decided he wanted to vote. White people were like, we don't advise you to do that. And he's like, I fought fascists, thanks. This is my country. I'm going to vote. He went and voted. That same night, white supremacists came to his home and they killed him. They killed that man for letting his voice be heard. And he was a veteran. So like, disenfranchisement as American as apple pie. Declaration of Independence says one thing, we see another when it comes to actually instituting it. And I say all that to set up the framework of and even before when I get to where we are now, I'm sorry, I have to.
No, go ahead.
Marks the 100th anniversary of the 19th Amendment. So women got the right to vote 100 years ago, but that left out Black women. Many Black women still could not vote. And do you know when Black women, all people essentially got the right to vote? Do you know?
I'm going to have to say no on this one.
Yeah, I don't know.
1965 with the
No way.
Yes, the Voting Rights Act created an added layer of protection that got rid of all of the things that were disenfranchising all of the people from participating in the civic process. So
I would not have guessed that year, 1965.
My mother was alive.
Wow.
My mother was born into a system where if she could vote in the year she was born, she couldn't vote.
Right.
Like that, it's not ancient.
That's not that far. No, that's not ancient history.
It's not even really. It's some people's actual memory who are still alive that they couldn't vote in the period.
If I put it in this context, that was 10 years before I was born. That's not that long ago. No, people, I'm not that old, but that's not that long ago.
I don't know. That's just for you back.
Thanks, Henry. Thanks a lot.
So what was the status of the Electoral College and things like that are tools that are used to continue? I mean, obviously, disenfranchisement has been a systematic approach to continuing to dismantle the democracy.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
And so at that point, you know, if we look back, and you're obviously very well versed in the history of this, which is incredible. I feel like a little put to shame that I haven't been studying for this.
Oh, you and me both.
Conversation.
You and me both.
You know,
I have to know this.
But she's here to educate us. That's what that's for.
Yeah. And so I wonder there's a few points, 1965 during Reconstruction, and boy, I hope those aren't the only two good glimmering points. But there were moments when there was a push for re-enfranchisement, if that's a word. I don't know.
Yeah.
Does that even matter these days that it's an actual word? I don't think it does.
No, it doesn't.
But so I wonder, what was the stat? How were these systematic tools that are being used today? How are they being applied? And what are you? Lee and I were kind of going back and forth a little bit about this, both on the same side.
Yes.
But bouncing it around, like, what are some of the main tools that are being used today to reinforce the disenfranchisement?
Really great question. So one, the Electoral College was created in the event that the elites felt as though the people were not smart enough to choose their president.
Mm-hmm.
So electoral college was created as like a check and balance on the popular vote.
Boy.
Where some delegates are not committed. They do not have to commit to going to a specific candidate, and they can choose and flip however they want. You know?
That's where Henry and I were. He was referring to that discussion. We both agreed and felt the same way about the Electoral College being one of the main constructs to hold the disenfranchisement up very high. You know, that was one of the main things. So
yeah, and so that's a check and balance that, like, all people, not just Black people, white people, or historically marginalized people, that's all people should be offended at that.
Yeah. Yes.
So that's like one, like, really major one.
Yeah.
And right now we're seeing, I said to returning citizens is the term we use. We're trying to normalize it. And that's people who are convicted of felonies, former felons.
Yes.
Many of whom do not get their rights back to vote. Right.
Yeah.
And that felony status is weaponized against them from voting and then from other things. There are 2 states that allow voting while in prison, and that's Maine and Vermont.
Yeah.
And they both have 1.3, 1.4% Black people.
Right.
and then you have states like Alabama, Florida, Tennessee, Virginia.
Yeah.
That you have to have the hardest fight. Once you get convicted of a felony, you have to jump through hoops to potentially, possibly regain, access to vote.
You can petition for gaining your civil right back of voting. Right. Yeah.
But it's hard, and they've made the process very difficult in many of these states to regain access to the democracy and returning citizens. They work jobs, they pay taxes because they did something wrong. And to be clear now, come on, y'all.
Well, I
did some stuff that I should have been in jail for too.
Wait, Corinne, let me.
I'm not admitted to anything.
I did some stuff that I didn't get caught for.
No, but Corinne, but check this out. I was doing some research just on later in the podcast. I'm gonna give you some tools, a couple websites that really put things out there. But one of the things when you're talking about the different states and all of the tools that they have for, what you called it, returning citizens, right? Is that what you said?
Citizens.
So I was reading this information and I was floored because I'm like, wow, half of these officials are just as felonious as the people who've been convicted. Yeah. But yet they're creating the laws that stop them from voting. Yes. And it was and it's no accident, or I should say, I don't think it's a coincidence where a lot of the states that make it so difficult to possibly regain your voting rights are red states, as we should say, or typical red states, or were part of states that were not part of the Union before the Civil War. It's not a coincidence, people. It's not a coincidence. I just wanted to throw that in there. Oh man, I was going over a lot of that information about the different states and their voting laws, and it's mind-boggling. It's staggering how much you have to do, and then you even do all that, and they say, "Well, wait, no, your ID doesn't match," or I could
match on your mail-in ballot.
I could go on and on.
Or it's a polling location, and they don't tell you that your polling location has changed. And those are the things that we see, and those are the things that I am fighting to protect the most vulnerable Floridians from. electoral cycle.
Yeah. So along that line, would you just dig or expose a little bit more? What are the biggest challenges that you specifically are working with the people that you are representing and moving toward clearing up and empowering? What are those big challenges that you're dealing with most?
Okay. So one is vote by mail disinformation. So Florida is the leader in the nation for vote by mail. 62% of our ballots cast are cast by mail. That's on an everyday average election. Florida's most vote by mail ballots are not absentee. They are counted first. So it's easy to vote by mail in Florida. It's how we do it, right?
So just to clear that up for our listeners, voting by mail is a legal option in Florida.
In Florida. And some states, it's state by state because there is no federal oversight of elections. The Voting Rights Act provided some of that, but it was recently gutted by Republicans. Like each state has its own practices. And in Florida, vote by mail is one that we could use. So voting by mail, one, making sure people feel comfortable receiving their ballot and sending it back because there's a lot of distrust in the postal system. And then also making sure people understand that particularly in Florida, Donald Trump's only path to victory, this is C3 or C4, if we can just talk plainly.
Talk cleanly, please.
Donald Trump's path to victory, his best shot, only reasonable shot lies through Florida. So we anticipate that the vote by mail signatures are going to be scrutinized heavily. So helping people also understand, like, you got to sign it the same way you sign your checks, and understanding the ballot curing process back end, which means, like, so if someone does say your ballot, your signature didn't match, you have till the Thursday after elections, 2 days to go in and fix your signature to make sure that your vote does count. So that's
critical. Yeah.
That's like the biggest thing that we're trying to get people to understand. And then also making sure people feel comfortable going out and voting early and not waiting till election day. And a lot of that's like COVID, people.
Right.
Florida's about to be 100% open, but everybody's got a thumb as the governor. And going outside.
Yeah.
So the biggest hurdles I think that we have.
Okay.
Wise. Yeah.
What's the temperature gauge on participation for Black communities down there in Florida and other communities that I imagine that you're also working heavily with the Latino communities and things like that as well. So what's the thermometer on that? How are they? Are they riled up? Are they going to help us?
So overall, participation we're expecting higher participation than normal. Most ballots will be cast by mail, we anticipate. In terms of Black and Latinx votes, Black voters, Black women, we got y'all. We always got y'all.
All right. Yeah.
2012 have the most consistent voters. We're dependable. Black men, though, are feeling they have a bad taste in their mouth for both candidates. They don't like Trump. They don't like Biden. They don't feel represented. And actually Trump's narrative, because he's putting in work down here.
I've heard over the last few days. Yeah.
That $500 billion platinum plan for Black folk. Whatever.
Yes, I know.
At the same time, while he's eliminating diversity training for all federal employees, but this $500 billion, whatever, sir. Anywho. But, like, we're seeing Black voters feeling more disenfranchised and feeling less motivated to vote. So our focus is on the C4 side, really making sure we're messaging to Black men about why this election is important and why the Biden-Harris ticket is important for them. But also really localizing elections, focusing on sheriff, state attorneys, and judicial candidates and other local electeds that will galvanize them. Latinx voters, we are working with them. Something to note is that the Latinx community is not a monolith. There are Cubans, Venezuelans, Colombians, Puerto Ricans, Mexicans,
absolutely
different. And so the messaging to each community is different. Cuban voters are going to turn out. The thing is, Cuban voters don't turn out for us. They turn out for the opposition, Cuban men in particular. Other Latinx constituencies, we do see that we're doing our best to turn them out and to gear them up. We are going to see record levels of participation this cycle. And there are more registered Democrats in the state of Florida than there are Republicans.
Wow.
And, you know, it's about to be a fight. I think that we can win it, but we have to win by a sizable amount. Florida is really hard. You could do a whole podcast on Florida.
Yeah. That's true. Hey, well, I was going to say, you know what? Let's take a quick break. That was a lot. That was a lot of good information. Corinne, man, I want to keep going with that. Let's slide a break in here real quick, and we'll come back and kind of finish this part of the conversation before we move on to some other things about voting. How's that sound?
Sounds good.
All right. We'll be right back, everybody. All right, everybody. Welcome back. Welcome back from that last break. Corinne, you want to go ahead and finish out. Is there anything else that you want to talk to our listeners about with disenfranchisement, or specifically with what the work is you're doing in the state of Florida?
The only thing around disenfranchisement is that it is an issue. While some may feel disenfranchisement doesn't affect them, just know that as long as it affects some, it always has the potential to affect you. And so that you should always be advocating and fighting against it, because all people who are tax paying, who are here, who are benefiting this country and benefiting from this country deserve to have heard and to be represented, to make sure that all people are being represented and all voices are being heard, so that it is a true representative democracy. And in regards to the work in Florida, the only thing that is, if you have relatives in Florida, if you have friends in Florida, please, October 5th is the last day for us to register to vote in this November election. Before November 5th, make sure they're registered to vote. Ask them if they're registered to vote by mail. Reassure them that it is safe and easy, and encourage them to get out the vote, because Florida is definitely going to be
a battle state.
A battle state. I was going to cuss, but I was like, I don't know if I'm allowed.
Oh, no. Well, no, don't let me stop you. What were you going to say? This is all no holds barred.
Clusterfuck. There's a lot. So, but no, a battle state sounds better. So please.
No. I think your initial, it's going to be a clusterfuck. Yeah, that's a true representation of what it's going to be.
I think that's actually what the Trump's campaign is going for, to create.
I'm sorry, he's going to sow it, and you can call me, you say what you want. Pete Antonacci in Broward County, which is the blackest county in the state of Florida, is a Ron DeSantis appointed supervisor of elections. He is a Republican supervisor of elections in the blackest county.
Wait. Say that one more time.
His name is Pete Antonacci. He is the supervisor of elections in Broward County. He was appointed to the role when Brenda Snipes, who, remember 2018, there was a whole hullabaloo. She stepped down. Ron DeSantis became governor. He appointed Pete Antonacci to oversee the Broward elections. In August, we saw insane lines and confusion from Black, predominantly poor immigrant populations in their community, not knowing where to vote, not knowing how to cast their vote, finding their polling locations closed. And we anticipate so much more of that this cycle. So it's just going to be a hotbed of craziness, and just like here, and make sure that you're doing your due diligence if you have Florida friends, to make sure that they vote, and that they vote early, so that their vote cannot be contested.
Wow. And then
I heard also that there is a sort of legal constitutional loophole of some sort that if the popular vote is not counted and agreed upon and tabulated within a certain number of days after the election, then the Electoral College gets to sort of choose on their own without regard for the popular vote.
Yes.
Is that?
Yes.
Well, and that's what we were talking about.
Please inform me about that
yeah,
a little bit.
she can expand on that. But that's what we were talking.
That's why the clusterfuck is going to happen.
Yes, and that's also what we were talking about earlier with the Electoral College does not have to go with the popular vote. That's but go ahead, go Karen, go ahead into deeper into that. Yeah, what Henry asked.
So, yes, essentially that is true. The concern is that if the votes aren't counted and they're too close, that the loudest voice is going to just win out. The electoral cycle, Electoral College is going to move in favor of the candidate with which they choose, they think actually won, or they think they want to represent. And we don't want that to happen. And that's also why nationally across the country, there are plans with what we call fight back tables to already start shifting the narrative with like count every vote and encouraging everyone to vote early so that on election night, it is a very decisive victory for whoever the winner is, so that there is no. I personally, you probably don't want to hear my conspiracy theories, but I think that
I do actually. Please.
That we could be headed into the Second American Revolution. I really do. I think if this president tries to steal this election, or I think if Joe Biden wins and Donald Trump says that, like the ballots weren't, they were cheating, that his people are going to come out, and that we are going to see an uprising around an ideology. And America is literally soul. America's democracy literally is hanging in the balance. This president that he could not commit to a peaceful transfer of power. Transfer of power is the cornerstone of a good democracy, right?
Yes.
So we've elected a dictator into our democracy who is trying, in his campaign, they're trying to figure out how to circumvent the electoral process because he's doing so bad poll-wise. So this is why I'm so passionate.
No, that's awesome, because like what you just said, that's why it was so important for us to tie in the beginning of our episode what democracy is and what it should be. That's why it's so important, because look at everything that's going on right now. And your theory is not necessarily far-fetched. That's not
my concern.
Yeah. I think there's so many more people who are concerned or have that legitimate concern than you think. I really do believe that. Wow. Let's Henry, if you're willing, man, let's put a pin in that for right now. And I think we can let's tackle that on another episode.
Hey, should we have a whole episode of conspiracy theories?
I think we should.
I'm not prone to them, but gosh darn it, they are like
they're
not really theories at this point, if you know what I'm saying.
Where there's smoke, there's fire, right? So
that's right.
Yeah. So
and
go
sorry.
Ahead. No, go ahead. Go ahead.
This thing is burning inside of me. I'm hoping that some of your listeners out there, probably not a whole lot of Republicans, especially veteran Republicans, but essentially what I'm saying is any veteran, and I know several of them, and I know a lot of them, and I know that a lot of that culture, especially among the white veterans, is very Republican. I don't understand it, but they fought for freedom. And here they're waving the flag of someone who's trying to dismantle our democracy and our republic. the very thing that they laid their life down for. And that's where I was saying, if these people are just voting for the Trump regime because they're racist, I hate that. I think it's disgusting, but I understand. But if they're voting for this Trump regime for any other reason for that, and they're in that veteran population, like this guy is trying to destroy what they fought for.
That's a really good point.
Even if they are voting just, their racism then is even stronger than the thing that they went out to lay their life down for, which was to protect the freedom and the democracy and the Constitution of this country.
Right.
And that follows along with all the police.
Yeah. Yeah.
They are sworn. All of these people have sworn to defend our Constitution.
Yeah. And
now they're going and voting contrary to that. For what? They're willing to trade in, you know, our way of life they're willing to trade in a throwback to a more overtly racist reality where people are just publicly oppressed and that's okay. And they're willing to just trash, you know, this patriotic ideal. And this is where I don't understand. Like, for example, our United States flag has been hijacked. Now, if you have a flag out in front of your house, it's a sign of racism in a weird way.
It is.
It's weird. And it's sad. It's pathetic that I feel embarrassed sometimes. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And these people who claim who are saying they're patriots, but really they're just racist. And you can't even say that it's all just for money stuff because so many of them are poor. So many poor white people.
And the country's not even and it's not even taking care of them the way it should as like you said, veterans, for instance, right?
Yeah.
It's not even taking care of them the way they
cutting social services. They're cutting off their nose despite their own face.
Yeah.
For what? Please, this message, please, people, if you hear this, like, you know, vote for at least, like, let's preserve our democracy and our republic. You can still be ignorant and racist, all right? But don't dismantle our country for that ideal. I'm sorry, I'm off my soapbox.
No.
We need more of that. We need more people who are able and willing to make those appeals because that's not my job and I won't. So I'm glad that you will.
Yes, and that's exactly why, Henry. I was in our break. I was talking to Corinne about you and I's friendship and how we came together and got connected. It was over after George Floyd's murder, and I put a post out, and paraphrasing at this point, but I put a challenge out, especially to my white male friends, that I as a black man and us as black people in this country have been calling these things out for so long, and yet no one's listening to us. So I'm going to keep doing that, but I need you to do exactly what you just did. That's exactly what has to happen, because then people who look like you will then start to talk to you about it, but you already understand what's going on.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's no.
Got to do it together. It's not a black problem.
Right.
It's not like, oh yeah, that's y'all's problem.
It's right.
Good luck with that, black people and all the rest.
No, we've got to do this together, man. That's what this is about. So
now, wait.
No, thank you. Oh, there you go. Ahead.
As soon as when I become a landowner, I'm going to be a Republican. Then I'm going to. If I can join the ranks of the white male landowners, you know.
I knew there was something weird about it, man. I knew as soon as you get your seat at the table, you're gonna. Yeah. I figured. Oh no. So guys, like moving forward, right? We've covered some heavy stuff most of this episode. but moving forward, like let's talk about like voting is a civic duty, right? If you're not one of the people who, if you're not a returning citizen, and Corinne, I love that phrase. So thank you for introducing that. But if you are a tax-paying citizen right now, who is not a returning citizen, it is a civic duty to exercise this right that people have lost their lives over, people have fought for, and let me be clear, we are not telling you who to vote for. I know I have a preference of who I would want you to vote for. We are not telling you who to vote for. Let's just be clear there. But if you do not exercise your civic duty, then I do not want to hear any voices about what might be happening in the future or what any particular official is doing, because a good democracy requires civic participation. And if you are making the choice not to participate without any roadblocks in your way, then I can't have anything to do with you. That's not cool. We can't do that.
Right.
For people who might have listened to this episode, or who've listened to any of my social media posts about it, and I will tell you too that on a personal story, there's a young man who I mentor, and when we first started having conversations, was not a registered voter. And so I said, well, why not? And he actually told me, he's like, I think it's a very serious thing. And when I came out of high school and they're like, register to vote. But he was like, but I didn't understand what that meant. And because I took it seriously, I did not want to just be registered and not know what I was doing. So I told him I understand that. So I will tell you guys now, he is a registered voter along with his sister. She's also registered. And I have helped him find information in his specific city and county of the elected officials and what to do, what the issues are, so that he can be an informed voter. And that's what we're trying to get across to people as well. Don't buy into all this disinformation or misinformation about how to vote and what the issues are. And just because someone spent $1 billion on their campaign has no bearing on what their governing policies might be. One good site is called howto.vote. If you are not registered, howto.vote, it really does a good job of, once you put your information in there, it's a nonpartisan website, and it takes you step by step on what you need to do to get registered, and even the different state policies on what you need to do to register to vote. Earlier in the episode, Corinne, you mentioned how Florida, the date is October 5th, correct?
Yep.
So people, you got to pay attention, because every state's deadline to register is different. Again, howto.vote is one good nonpartisan website that can help you figure out the deadline, figure out what you need to do to get registered. Also, for those of you who are registered and say, well, my vote doesn't count, or, well, the system is fucked up anyway, so I'm just not going to participate. Well, as we talked about earlier in this episode, local elections, like this federal election, is uber important. Let's be clear. But it doesn't stop at this federal election. Local elections are where you have so much more power, and your voice is so much louder than you think it is.
Amen.
So go to ballotready.gov. ballotready.org. That's ballotready.org. Put in your information, and it talks about the different issues that are affecting your county, your city, your town, your state. It will tell you about your elected officials. It even has their different stances on the different issues that you're going to be voting on. And so you can, I know we talked about, okay, what if there's candidates who don't really represent me, right? Ballotready.org actually shows all of the candidates. Some you may not even heard of because they don't have the money to campaign like those who raise money do. So you will see those things. And I think you just have to be informed as possible. Be as informed as possible. But it is a civic duty. You need to participate in order for the democracy that we want to have and that we want to see. You have to participate in this. If you are a bystander and you are choosing not to, then I don't want to hear you talk anything after the election about what's not fair and what's not right. That's just not going to fly. It doesn't work that way. Sorry about that. That was my soapbox. So there you go. But if anyone else has anything they'd like to add about moving forward and what voting actually means, feel free.
No, I think you covered it. Voting is your voice. Voting is saying where your money goes. Like we choose to, invest our personal savings. We're very cautious about where our money goes. But when you pay taxes and then you don't vote, you let people with the loudest voice decide what's being done with your money.
Yeah.
So let your voice be heard. If people and society and social and racial justice doesn't move you, hopefully the coins will help. So
something's got to move you. If you're not moved by anything, you might want to look in the mirror, right? Because that's a bigger problem than anything. Wow, you guys, this has been a powerful episode. Corinne, greatly appreciate you joining us and educating us. We will definitely be bringing you back on because as Henry and Janelle and I have talked about, we're in this for the long haul. This is not just something that we think, okay, we're just going to do this because this is the next trend. No. We're in this for the long haul of getting people on the same wavelength of moving forward, being in action on equality. That's what we are trying to do.
So I'm down.
And by being in action, I'd like to elaborate a little bit on what Lee is mentioning. Excuse me.
Mm-hmm.
Our plan as this grows is that it becomes more than just a podcast.
Yeah.
But also that we will offer, education. We'll offer even workshops and training, all of these various facets that are necessary to begin to communicate the experience of the different populations across, race lines.
Yes.
And across the lines of experience that otherwise won't be breached, because without those levels of understanding, then people will simply form their own crazy views about the other side without ever walking over there, And as we know, then that's very often an inaccurate portrayal that we create in our minds. And also we're looking to create systems whereby through various forms of funding, but we can, maybe get a kid a college scholarship.
Absolutely.
And, these types of things, so that this is not just talking.
That's right.
But where we start is having the conversation.
Appreciate that, Henry. I appreciate
that's where our conversation has been moving
in
this direction we're going, and that's what Lee is talking about. So, Corinne, we love having you on. Maybe you can become a regular, just an educator for us, and a source of inspiration. I mean, really,
Completely.
I'm gonna go see 2022. I'm gonna be an elected official.
Yeah,
I'm with it. Hey, speak it.
and it was a pleasure to be here and an honor. And I really don't know that much. I know a lot about it, very little, and then not much about anything else. And I look forward to learning from you guys too. And this was fun.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Everybody, this has been the latest episode of Move the Needle on the Live All Good podcast. You can find us on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts. There's a couple other platforms that we are on. You can also find us on the website liveallgood.com. Everybody, it's really important that if we are trying to really make change and we're trying to undo and rebuild a lot of things that we are seeing that this country was founded on, start somewhere. Start by voting. Start with your civic duty and participation. All right. Until next time, you guys, we'll leave it there. We'll talk to you guys soon. Thanks for listening.
Thank you.
Thank you.